Imagine waking up in a world where a Canadian can move to London without a visa, an Australian company can ship goods to the UK without tariffs, and New Zealand Navy sails alongside the Royal Navy to protect Pacific trade routes. This is not some far off fantasy, it's on the average of becoming reality. Leaked diplomatic cables and whispers from insider sources suggest that the UK, Canada, Australia, and the New Zealand are closer than ever to forming the CANZUK Union, an alliance that could disrupt the balance of global power overnight. The rumors turned real. For decades, CANZUK was little more than a dream tossed around at Commonwealth meetings, a nostalgic note to the days when these nations were united under the same flag. Politicians used it as a taking point, think tanks published theoretical reports, and journalists wrote speculative. But now, the paper talk has turned into pen on paper. In London, the air around Whitehall is thick with secrecy. Deep inside the Foreign Office, away from the press and public eye, diplomats have been spotted entering side doors with briefcases in hand. The kind of briefcases that don't just carry paperwork, but the seeds of a historic geopolitical shift. Inside, trade negotiators from Ottawa, Canberra, and Wellington sit across from their British counterparts, sketching the outlines of a deal that could reshape the global order. These are not casual courtesy visits. They are carefully choreographed sessions where every word is measured, every handshake loaded with meaning. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in Canada, the mood is equally urgent. Senior ministers have quietly commissioned detailed impact assessments, instructing economists and policy analysts to run simulations on what a CANZUK free trade zone would mean for the nation's powerhouse industries: oil from Alberta, wheat from Saskatchewan, tech from Toronto and Vancouver. Early whispers suggest the numbers are staggering: billions in potential growth, new export channels, and a competitive edge in markets currently dominated by the US and China. To the political class in Ottawa, this is not just about economics, it's about securing Canada's place in a new global hierarchy. Further south in the Pacific, Australia and New Zealand are already moving pieces on their own chessboards. In Canberra, the Department of Defence is reviving joint naval deployments plans, envisioning Australian frigates patrolling alongside the Royal Navy and Canadian destroyers in the Indo-Pacific, unified presence to safeguard trade routes and deter adversaries. Across the Tasman Sea, Wellington's immigration officials are quietly drafting policy frameworks for an unprecedented freedom of movement agreement, allowing citizens of all four nations to live, work and study anywhere in the CANZUK bloc without red tape. This is no longer political daydreaming, this is the nuts and bolts groundwork of an alliance in the making. Why the rush now? Global pressure is intense. The timing of these talks is no coincidence. The world is in the middle of geopolitical shakeup unlike anything seen in decades. China's reach into the Pacific has exploded. Gleaming new ports, fortified naval bases, and ironclad trade deals have popped up like chess pieces strategically placed to dominate the region. In Canberra and Wellington, policymakers are quietly admitting what was once whispered. The Pacific is no longer their uncontested backyard. Each new Chinese investment project feels less like economic cooperation and more like a slow tightening of a strategic nose. At the same time, the United States is looking inward, preoccupied with domestic political storms, rising divisions, and an electorate increasingly wary of foreign entanglements. Washington's role as the world's policeman, a role Australia, Canada, and the UK once relied upon, is fading. Across the Atlantic, Europe is still energy crisis and fractures inside the EU itself. Countries that once moved in lockstep are now showing signs of drift, leaving space for new alliances to step onto the global stage. The UK, this moment is nothing short of a lifeline, a chance to rebuild lost influence and trade access after the EU door slammed shut. For Canada, it's a way to break free from over-reliance on US markets by partnering with nations that share its language, laws, and cultural DNA. For Australia and New Zealand, it's a shield on an economic and security insurance policy against being boxed in by superpowers with competing agendas. The message is clear: move now or risk becoming spectators in a new world order that will be decided without them. What a CANZUK union would look like, picture this: a free trade area that stretches across 5 continents, connecting the Atlantic, Pacific, and even parts of the Indian Ocean. A visa-free travel zone where citizens can live and work in any of the 4 countries without restrictions. Unified military cooperation pooling naval fleets, intelligence networks, and strategic bases. Economically, CANZUK would instantly be a global powerhouse. Third largest GDP in the world behind only the US and China, command over vast natural resources from Canada's oil sands to Australia minerals, New Zealand's agriculture and the UK's financial services. A combined population of around 135 million with shared values, democratic governments, and English as a common language. Who doesn't want this to happen? Every great alliance has its enemies, and CANZUK is no exception. The European Union fears the UK might be becoming too powerful outside Europe, setting an example for other countries to leave. Washington worries that Canada could pivot away from its historically tight economic ties with the US. Beijing sees this as a direct strategic threat to its Belt and Road ambitions and dominance over Pacific shipping routes. An EU diplomat was even overheard saying, if CANZUK becomes reality, it will be the single biggest realignment of Western alliances since NATO. If CANZUK works, these 4 countries could negotiate massive joint trade deals, coordinate military power on a global scale, and issue a passport that instantly becomes one of the strongest in the world. If it fails, it could fracture diplomatic relations, embolden rival powers, and leave each member scrambling for weaker bilateral deals. This is not just about economics, it's about the future security and influence of the English-speaking world. This alliance would not be built from scratch, far from it. The bonds between the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are forged in the crucible of history. These nations share for more than just a common language. They share blood, sacrifice, and a legacy written on the world's battlefields. From the mud-filled trenches of World War I, where soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder against impossible odds, to the harrowing beaches of Normandy during World War II, where their flags flew side by side in the fight for freedom, these nations have proven time and again that when the stakes are life or death, they move as one. The story did not end when the guns fell silent. In the deserts of Afghanistan, their troops once again fought and bled together, demonstrating that even in the 21st century, their alliance is as relevant as ever. Behind the front lines, their cooperation is just as strong. Through the Five Eyes intelligence network, their spies and analysts share secrets, coordinate counter-terrorism efforts, and safeguard each other's national security. This is not a casual partnership, it's a deep, strategic bond that most other nations can only dreaming of replicating. Culturally, politically, and legally, they are already incensed. Their legal systems share common roots, their parliaments operate under similar democratic frameworks, and their citizens often feel more like distant relatives than foreigners. A formal CANZUK union would simply give structure to what has always existed: a brotherhood of nations bound by trust, shared values, and a willingness to defend each other. This time, it would not just be about shared history, it would be about shared strength, pooled resources, and the creation of a geopolitical powerhouse capable of influencing the course of the 21st century. Diplomatic insiders say negotiations could be ready for a formal announcement at the next Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. If that happens, the CANZUK Union could be operational within 3 to 5 years. A time is enemy. Lobbyists, foreign governments, and even domestic critics are working to derail the talks, warning of sovereignty loss, economic risk, and political backlash. The window for action is narrow, and leaders will have to move fast if they want this to succeed. The question is not whether CANZUK could work, it's whether these leaders have the courage to pull it off before the world changes beyond recognition. History is watching, and so are millions of citizens who could soon be part of the most powerful new alliance of the 21st century.